Well, good morning, folks, and welcome to Sunday Forum today. We are continuing with our Lenten theme, Blessed Vulnerabilities, and this week's blessing is Blessed are the Curious. And here is a panel of curious folks, curious for a variety of different reasons or ways in which we've connected that. I'm happy to introduce Sylvie Mons. One of the reasons I thought of Sylvie is I had her in confirmation, and she was always very curious and asking lots of questions. There's usually one of them in confirmation. But it was something, it's easy to apologize for your questions, but we pastors actually love the questions, and even the difficult ones. We have Rich here, who is in the county prosecutor's office. You can probably imagine curiosity playing into that. On the other side of the high school equation, we have Pat Shelley as a high school guidance counselor. You can imagine the ways in which curiosity can be really important. And Martin Wells, retired bishop, retired pastor, but really here in the capacity as a spiritual director. I'm interested to learn more about spiritual direction and what that means, but also the way you connect curiosity there. So let's take a moment and just welcome our panelists together. Thank you all for being here. I asked each of you to maybe think about a story in relationship to curiosity and maybe in connecting that. Sylvie, would you be willing to get us started today? You're right here, so.
I was really actually thinking about confirmation.
I thought you might, yeah.
And I remember talking with Martin Wells like a little before confirmation, and then with you and Lori and all the other pastors. And I'm really appreciative of the support you gave me, and I didn't get confirmed, as you all probably know. And it's because of my curiosity, I think it led me to question. I'm not necessarily the status quo, but what I've been around my whole life, and I still love going to church. I love the music and some of the stories, like other stories, like Tower of Babel and Abraham and Hagar. I don't really, it doesn't really sit well with me, but I like following the curiosities, and I'm appreciative to all of you who have supported me and followed me in that.
Do you think that making confirmation less about, checking off all of these things so that you can graduate and get a diploma or whatever church equivalent that is, versus a space where questions can be asked, where you can read the difficult stories and go, I don't like that, and have a space to say, I want to ask more questions about that? How do you think that played to your journey and your relationship to this place, St. Mark's?
Yeah, I really did. I really liked the questions that were asked in confirmation, and looking at the Bible through different lenses, like taking it literally versus taking it in more of a explanation for things that people didn't quite understand in the time. And I couldn't get confirmed because I couldn't go up and say the Apostles' Creed and the Lord's Prayer and I didn't want to disrespect everyone else's belief. But I really enjoyed that environment and learning more about the Bible. It's helped me a lot in a multitude of ways.
Yeah.
Through school and through seeing the web.
Yeah. I would say probably in our faith journey, like none of these people out here don't have questions about the Bible too. And I think sometimes we expect to have answers when sometimes the reality is we pose questions that we don't necessarily know the answer to. Do you feel like, what was that?
Questions that raise more questions.
Questions that raise more questions, or questions that we can't answer, so we respond with the question. So do you feel like, or how do you feel like St. Mark's or maybe the pastors or your family, how have people like supported you in your curiosity without necessarily saying you have to get confirmed, you have to believe a certain way, you have to get these answers? What is the difference to you, do you think?
I think that people didn't say that, and that like you guys liked hearing my questions and liked discussing, not necessarily coming to an answer, but cultivating more questions and just acknowledging that I have questions and that I don't necessarily think about things the same way as you do, and neither of the way we think about things is bad.
Yeah.
And I guess letting me do my own thing.
Yeah. Well, you still read, you still participate in things like this, which I'm thankful for. You still have a relationship with us. And I think that in so much of Christian community out there, it's kind of like an all or nothing. It's like you have to believe all of these things to be part of the community, to be a good whatever, or, shunned and fling you out where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. And St. Mark's is sort of a different kind of place in that way. So I feel like not just lift you up as an illustration, but like you are, I think, a great example of the way that you can walk this walk without necessarily reaching all the same conclusions. And you're still welcome here. So thank you for your curiosity. Yes, Dave?
So I have a suggestion. I don't have any answers for you, Sylvia. This is more for St. Mark's. When I was about Edwin's age, I was the high school youth leader at my previous church and decided that we should study different religions. And there were a lot of parents that weren't too crazy about that idea at the time.
You might mention that if it's not the ELCA congregation.
This is true. But we took a month to study each, and the kids got to choose. I had no particular agenda or religions that we needed to study, but at that point in time, the Mormon Church was just growing crazy, so everybody wanted to learn about them, and we did, Greek Orthodox, a handful of others. Went to study. Well, so we had, and it was really hard to find unbiased information, because everything is, all of the handbooks that were written were pro whatever denomination wrote it and anti everybody else. So I went through those and tried to take out as much of the inflammatory language as possible. And then the next week we had somebody from that religion come sit down and talk to us all. The kids got to ask questions. The third week we went and worshiped at their service, wherever it was and whenever it was. And then the fourth week we just had a group discussion and talked about what we learned. And it was really good for me. And I know it was good for a lot of the high school kids who are now adults. Anyway, that's a thought.
There is a wonderful ELCA curriculum that does something very similar, and it's called Honoring Our Neighbor's Faith. And I love that title because it really gets to the heart of what I think our call is that we are called by Christ to honor and love our neighbor, and that part of that is honoring our neighbor's faith. And maybe even doing that with a little curiosity. Last year, we went to a Jewish and a Greek Orthodox service, and we're still hoping to maybe make it to a Latin Catholic. So we do a little bit of that too. So thanks for that. Rich, what about you? Where do you see your curiosity as being an asset, a blessing?
Well, as I told you guys, I'm with the county prosecutor's office. Before I did that, I was actually in private practice for 5 years. Vastly different issues and vastly different things go on, right? As far as the quest for curiosity, I kind of started to look at it as really a quest for knowledge in a lot of ways. We talk about the answers, and it's the questions along the way. So in private practice, it was a lot of learning different topics and really diving in on them. Going from one case where you're dealing with maybe a family going through a divorce where the children have issues and you need to kind of research on what the counseling is going to look like, what the reunification is going to look like, versus the next day you're doing things like medical malpractice, and you're having to learn about a particular subspecialty of a doctor. And now in my job I do a bunch of different things with learning about, mental health providers, drug court, DNA, everything that kind of runs the gamut. So as far as curiosity, I think it's as long as you kind of have your why and your guiding principles, it's a lot of just that thirst for wanting to understand and have the knowledge behind a bunch of different topics all kind of at once. So
One maybe sort of idealized vision I think some people have of your profession is like you're in this great battle, this quest for truth. And we kind of live in a postmodern society now where, like, what is truth, as Pilate says in John's Gospel. We'll hear that in a few weeks. And I find, a courtroom, just turn on your average, like, procedural drama that's out there, it makes it look so dramatic, this sort of quest for truth. But sometimes it can be hard to just sort of, like, hone in on, like, what is truth? What is really going on? Versus, what are the facts? What are the information we have? So where do you find a tension, maybe, or not, between curiosity and this sort of quest for absolute truth?
I think it's accepting that a lot of times you're not going to get that answer. There's a lot of things that, I'm one of these people that once I get a particular topic or I get a facts of a particular case, I look at it from every single different angle. And frankly, my biggest challenge is sometimes I want to know the why to everything. And you're never going to know the why to everything. So you do the best you can with what you got and really just try to take all of that curiosity to the point where you have to kind of look at yourself and say, I'm not going to get that answer. And you got to be okay with it and make tough decisions from there.
I have a question, Rich. I saw an article in The Atlantic, just the headline, that said something about the world is a dark place, but that doesn't mean you can't experience wonder and curiosity about small things in your life. And I'm wondering, when you leave your job, what are the things that bring you joy in being curious?
Oh man. My two biggest hobbies outside of work, you mean, that bring me curiosity?
Yeah.
I'm a big DIYer. Before I went to law school, I did a year of carpentry. I very much enjoy that. When I get a chance, I try to dive into that as much as possible. And I love cooking. And so I read a ton of different cookbooks and different things and watch whatever Netflix documentaries kind of teach me how to cook. But that gives me a chance to kind of dive in and take my mind somewhere else and learn something a little less weighty for a little while. But it's still so much fun. So.
Do you experience any curiosity with your children?
Absolutely. I think it's whatever I'm in at the moment. It's even curiosity right now. So I have a 9-month-old. I have a 7-year-old boy and a 9-month-old daughter, and it's interesting just the dynamics of learning the difference between boys and girls, or the difference between even how they're doing now as infants. And so I've gotten back into doing research of how she learns, how she develops, how she is looking at the world, because they're so vastly different. And that's fun too.
I'm glad that you like cooking and yeah, right. I'm sure your family does too.
Right now it's just a lot of mashed up stuff.
It has to fit in the spoon.
But we live in a culture, in a society, and a consumeristic culture that, hey, that toaster is broken, throw it away, versus repairing it. I have Black & Deckers from my parents that they bought in the 70s that still function great, but there's kind of this planned obsolescence in thing. So by being curious about how can I do this myself, how can I repair, how can I fix, versus hiring a contractor or going out and buying something, a immensely, you've got to practice that curiosity and learn new skills and new things. With the DNA and with different situations and cases, kind of reminds me of being a pastor. It's like, oh, we've got a leaky roof. I guess I learn about leaky roofs this week, or whatever happens to come up. So, do you find both professionally and in your own personal life, do you find practicing curiosity exhausting, or do you find it this sort of never-ending source of joy and excitement?
It can certainly be exhausting. My wife tells me I need to lay off the project sometimes. But yeah, I think it can be exciting, it can be addicting, it can be powerful. That whole the sun's gone down, I gotta stop whatever project I'm doing outside, but I wanna see the finished result, and I wanna figure out how to do this last thing, or I've got kind of the answer I need to get to that next stage of the project, and you end up staying up later or thinking about it at night. Or research on a particular project can be that way too. So I think it's a delicate balance of understanding that you have limits, and it helps, remembering that I've got 2 children that I need to, make sure I'm compartmentalizing and getting their time in too, so the project can wait a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So.
When thinking about your curiosity at work, I'm just kind of thinking if it were me, I would be like, okay, I want to investigate why this person committed this crime. Like, what was their history? What led them to want to be aggressive, or or whatever it would be? And then you read these sad stories and you think, oh my God, I can't prosecute this person. Look what they did. Does that somehow play into how you approach your cases, or?
Yeah, I think it always comes back to the why. And like I said, especially in this age and age, we're dealing with a large segment of society that are dealing from complex mental health issues, from drug issues, and a lot of times they're overlapping, dual, self-medication for the mental health illness or triggered mental health issues from, that's where I see a lot of things where you kind of want to know the why. Because ultimately we hope that if we can find a why, we have the answer, right? So we know if there's a particular thing that we can do to put someone into a program or do something to help them, versus you have some people that just can't be helped, right? And they're complicated questions, and I get limited information from my side of the bench. So that's kind of also too when sometimes you want to know the why, but you never really will. And so you go as far as the curiosity will take you, and hopefully you're having the right discussions and the right, thought process as much as you can the whole way. But I get really frustrated sometimes because I do want to know all the whys, and it kills me that I don't sometimes get to.
I think we hear as pastors in the midst of tragedy, that question, why did God let this happen? Or, of all the people, why did it have to be me? Why did it have to be my child, or something like that? And it's something I really struggle with. I don't have the answer to the why. Job doesn't have the answer to why either. And that real challenge in that struggle. And I think it's like our brains are at war with itself. The feeling part and the rational part of the brain, it's like why we experience denial sometimes. It's just like we're not connecting all of those things. And I particularly experience this in my own life, of where my head and my heart, it's how I experience it, are going 2 different ways. And rationally, I can understand something that my heart cannot. And that quest, the futile quest of trying to reconcile those 2 things, can be really hard. And it can also dampen my own curiosity. It makes me kind of want to pursue the unanswerable question, maybe where we really just struggle with the question and not necessarily the answer, or finding another avenue that's more productive and psychological, researching the psychology behind violence or something like that kind of resonates more with me. So I'm curious. Other questions maybe for Rich at this moment? We'll have a moment to loop back around. But there have been some good conversations, good questions from the the peanut gallery. Well, Pat, I imagine in your professional life in particular, that just practicing a little what we would call holy curiosity with an individual can actually be one of your best tools. So I'm wondering about your experience with curiosity in your work.
Well, when you first asked me to be on this panel, I thought, sure, this will be fun. And then I got to thinking, okay, did he ask me because I'm a curious person or because she's a really curious?
Second.
That's why you're blessed.
And then I got to think, how curious am I really? Because I was raised in the other church from Sylvie, opposite church from Sylvie. I'm a recovering Southern Baptist. And you were not to question. You were, in fact, I had this conversation with a colleague the other day. You were told what to believe, and you were told who to believe, and that was it. And you took it. And I took that lesson quite well as a youth. And when I was in grad school, I took a class that the instructor had us, like Dave was talking about, talk about different philosophies, not just counseling theories, but philosophies. And so when I was telling my mom, oh, we're talking about yoga, and we're talking about Sufism, and all that, her first response was, you remember where you came from. Yes, Mom. So I never really thought of myself as a curious person. So I sat down with my dearly beloved Kevin the other day, because he's a very perceptive person, and he oftentimes knows me better than I know myself. And I said, how do you see, am I a curious person? And he says, well, I look at it in that you like to try things. I'm the one who makes the menu, because if Kevin made the menu, we'd eat the same thing every day. And he's actually the one who said that. He said, look at your closet based on my closet. You like to try things. I'm the one that oftentimes plans our trips, because otherwise we would go to Whidbey Island every year, which is a wonderful place, but I like to get out and do other things. So for me, that's where the curiosity is more broad than I had thought about. But it led me to my career, because I have been one who wants to know why people behave the way they do. And in that, I want to know, when I have two students who have come from similar dysfunctional backgrounds, where they live in poverty, they've been in foster care, they've been in mental health facilities, they have parents who are substance abusers. Why did one become Whitworth's Act 6 scholar and is now, a junior, she's a freshman at Whitworth, and the other one is in juvie every 2 weeks because they can't. So that's where my curiosity comes in. And sometimes our question is, what were you thinking? So for me, it's like, what causes you to think this way? You're asking, Rich was talking about the question of the not knowing the whys, and you're talking about sitting with questions. We oftentimes have that conversation with students if we have a situation where we have, crises happen at our school. Someone commits suicide, someone dies in an accident, and we oftentimes can't explain or can't let the kids know exactly what happened, because we have not been released to share that information. Well, of course, on social media, everybody knows everything. So they come to us and they say, well, why can't you tell us, or what happened, or whatever, and we say, it's hard to not be able to know the answers to everything. So it's working with those kids to be okay with not knowing. And then that curiosity with me, and I have to temper my curiosity. That's something else that we're taught in our counseling program, is when you start asking questions of students or parents or whatever, know why you're asking that question. Is it to move the conversation forward? Is it to come to a plan to help to develop a plan with that student, or to help them to examine themselves and where they wanna go, or is it just because you're nosy?
Yeah.
Oh, really? So why is that? So I have to be careful about what questions I ask, and some of them I think and I don't ask them. So,
So I find that an interesting thought, and I had that experience as a pastor, that tension between this sort of lurid curiosity versus a holy curiosity. And I always feel like more information, I'm a better functioner with more information. So I'm eager to ask those questions. But at some point, I find myself kind of tumbling down this rabbit hole of there is no explanation, there is no understanding. So that tension between curiosity for curiosity's sake versus being better informed and being able to better function, I find that quite compelling.
it's almost like sometimes you can have too much information.
You can, absolutely. Do you feel like, have you ever practicing this curiosity and, I don't know, maybe discovering something unexpected, maybe unsettling? Maybe this is a question for the whole panel, but have you ever experienced curiosity not being a blessing, maybe a curse instead?
Yes. So I'm always one who's wanting to, how can we make this work better? How can we make this work more efficiently? And I am bad about asking that question and then being put in charge of figuring out, come up with a plan for that. So for me, that's when it's a curse, when I say, so could we make this work better? And they'll go, yeah, why don't you do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Martin, I am mindful that curiosity probably resonates with you as a retired pastor, as a retired bishop, but also as a newly minted, relatively new spiritual director here at St. Mark's. I imagine that in pastoral care, in accompanying congregations in their ministry, but also in your work in spiritual care, spiritual direction, finding that curiosity is an important factor here. So,
Yeah. The heart of curiosity for me is adventure. I think that's one of the best words in the English language. And the best attribute we can all have is to nurture a sense of adventure that is pressing through the end of your knowledge to something on the other side that you can't identify. I'm afraid it made me what they would call in the Roman Catholic Church a late vocation, which means I bounced around from this to that, a Bachelor of Science in Business in college, and then law school, and then finally seminary. And so I took my time, to my parents' consternation. But I was thinking that I was going to be an appellate attorney. That was my deal. I loved moot court. I loved to make the argument to a panel of judges instead of a jury. And that was really fun. But I also knew that if I got my dream job, I'd be gone. I'd disappear for 7 or 8 years in a firm where I was asked to work maybe 80 hours a week, doing research for somebody else and trying to make partner. And I thought, man, life's too short. And about the same time, and I cannot explain it in any other way, I had a sense of call that perhaps I should think about ministry. And so I decided that I would do a trial year in seminary. And 2 things happened that satisfied curiosity about that. One is it finally caused my mother to admit that since I was 14 years old, she had been praying that I would be a pastor. She had never told me. And I thought, well, fix was in. The other thing that happened is at the end of that first year of seminary, I was still sort of on the knife edge. I wasn't sure exactly what I was called to do. And one of the very last days at that beautiful mansion at the top of the Berkeley Hills where I was studying theology at Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary, I walked across between the two main buildings in that lovely setting, and Susan Brio was standing there. And we had not talked much to one another during the course of the year, but it was clear that she was there trying to discern whether to go on to a PhD in English and literature or be a pastor. And I walked across in a really badly maintained garden, but it was still a garden. And we exchanged hello. She was an eager student who always sat in the front row, leaning forward, and I was in the back row, leaning back. So we didn't know one another terribly well, but she said hello, and she walked right straight up to me, and she kissed me.
Oh.
I've never been so surprised. I had no idea. And she said, I hope you come back next year. So it leads to a conundrum. Was I in fact called by the Holy Spirit? Or did that kiss just turn the switch?
You know, you should know this.
Yeah.
They call the Holy Spirit the kiss of love between the Father and the Son. So maybe the Holy Spirit was speaking through a kiss.
Works in mysterious ways.
Yeah.
So curiosity, you know, can get you some places that you don't expect to be. But I love my life. I love being retired. I love having freedom to do things. I've had a chance to study spiritual direction and to offer it as a conversation to you as members of St. Mark. The whole deal is just to have a conversation together, an ongoing conversation about how God is at work in your life. And so you come or you contact me only if, but particularly if, you would like to have a deeper conversation, an ongoing conversation about how God might be at work. And we thought that with our 4-year emphasis on vocation, the wonderful grant that this congregation won, that would be a way to extend the value of that grant for the congregation past the years of active work and into deep conversation one with another. But I'm going to be very interested in all kinds of things. I'm interested in the Ice Age floods. Mm-hmm. You know, if you haven't studied that stuff for a while, you should study that stuff. I'm interested in the Columbia River Treaty, a treaty between Canada and the United States over what will happen to the course of all those dams on the Columbia and the salmon that are being mashed up and we're losing in the meantime. I'm interested most recently in the history of the Nez Perce tribe south of us on the other side of the Clearwater River is their aboriginal home. And I'm particularly interested in Chief Joseph and how they got whacked in 1855 by a treaty the United States broke and then made even worse in 1873. And then came after the tribes and the bands of the Nez Perce who had not signed on to the treaty and didn't think they should be put on a reservation. Against everything they thought, they went to the reservation, except it all blew up in their faces because of Custer's last stand and some other things that happened. And they ended up retreating 1,200 miles. I'm going to take 2 weeks in September, and I'm going to go real slowly down that trail, a retreat, a spiritual pilgrimage. That's adventure, and that's how curiosity works for me.
Yeah. You know, I have found myself in various different types of counseling settings, whether they've been spiritual direction or clinical counseling. And I usually end up there because I can recognize within myself I'm out of sorts of a sort. And then there's that dreadful moment where the counselor looks back at you and says, so why are you here? And I'm going, I'm here because I don't know how to answer that question in part. And what I rely on in a sense is somebody who can draw out from within me what I can't even recognize within myself. So I'm wondering, do you feel like, in a sense, that practicing that holy curiosity with another person, that you're almost accompanying them in a self-discovery journey?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
that's
Do you
it.
care to elaborate?
Well, I was one who didn't know if I was a Christian when I was in college. I didn't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
I had been raised in the faith, baptized, confirmed, all that. But I could not, in all honesty, say to myself, I believe in God. I just couldn't do it. And I wrestled hard for about 6 months. And God did not answer. So I stopped praying. I stopped speaking. I went silent. And the next time I woke up, several months later, I realized I believed in God. And I didn't know what had happened. I think it was because I stopped trying so hard to make it my work and to accept the gift that had been given a long time before and now was coming back to me as pure gift. I had not talked myself into it. So, yeah, experiences like that are just, they're very precious, very precious.
I'm fascinated with your love of both natural history and human history, and that expression. I am a much lover of history, and I struggle sometimes when I read something and it's like a huge gloss, or like I don't understand the human behavior that led to here, and it might be some version of the I don't understand how the United States could just ignore, revoke these treaties willy-nilly. I think around your age, Sylvie, I really struggled because I was taking German classes, and that was my foreign language, and I learned all about this German culture, and I was having a really hard time understanding how can a bright, intelligent, friendly people perpetrate the horrors of the Holocaust and the Second World War? How could they turn to demagoguery? And I still struggle with answering that question, but it brought me to a quest. How does tension and unresolved questions lead you into curiosity and that quest for deeper understanding? Not necessarily with answers, but deeper understanding for you. I'm thinking in particular about history, but in anything.
There's an interesting ad that you may have seen on TV recently, a young folks running a coffee shop or something, and they realize at one point that there's no space for them to work because they've got boxes everywhere, and they decide they have to expand. And the guy's line is, go ahead, take the wall out. There's always another wall on the other side of that wall. And so it's just a matter of sequentially pushing through. And the way you do that is to study. So I'm on, there's a lot of books written on this Trail of Tears that Joseph and the tribe went through. And they don't agree with one another. There's a lot of facts that are still out there. But there's something also to then trying to make it tactile. So I promised myself, Susan doesn't believe this is true. I promised myself I'm going to sleep on the ground for those 14 nights. I don't know why exactly, but
Do you have a chiropractor?
I think it's part of the journey.
That actually leads into a question that I have about the physicality of curiosity. And this is for any or all of you. And one of the things that I've experienced as a spiritual director is the question, what is your body telling you right now? And I think that's, curiosity can lead us outward to the deficit of our own self-knowledge and relationships, right? We can be all about knowing the world, but not know what our own feelings are telling us, right? And so I wonder for any of you if listening, being curious about yourself and your own experience of your emotions has been something that you have explored.
Yeah, I think I have been working on that a lot recently. Just trying to really, I guess I figure out my emotions by vocalizing them. Because they can fester a lot for me, and so if I put them out there, then I can look at them. And so going about the world in a curious sense, and learning about the world, and then looking inward, and putting everything that's going on in here out there to look at again.
How do you do that? Do you journal? Do you
I don't.
talk to people?
I talk
about-
to people, I talk to myself. Yeah.
Sometimes we have to hear our own voice to
Yeah.
articulate something.
Yeah, if something's just going around in my head, it's gonna whirlwind. And so putting it out there and I think trying to put words down to, I don't journal, I probably should, but I think just setting things outside of yourself so you can look at them, because we're so used to looking at things outside of ourselves, and so then it makes it hard to look inward. And so you can help yourself, I think, by putting what's inside out.
And, you know, just as I think about it, I think curiosity can also, you know, depending on, I know some of the questions earlier were, you know, you can almost become addicted to it, or it can give you energy. And a lot of times I find that as I get more into projects, I get more focused on them, along that can come with that is stress or anxiety, because you're so focused on one thing and you can't stop for that. And frankly, it wasn't until the last 2-3 months where I took a look around and go, you know, yeah, it's great that I'm fulfilling that mental aspect of my life, but I didn't feel like I was also fulfilling a physical aspect of it, right? Because I was letting myself go in the process of doing all these, you know, 30,000 things. So I started doing things like the journaling, and by working out, by going, you know, doing different activities that help me kind of get away from it, so when I come back, I'm refreshed in my curiosity instead of kind of worn down by it. And that's an often overlooked thing.
For me, it's like listening to my body to take clues of what I need to do at certain times. It's been a very long couple of weeks at school, and so when I find myself getting sick, I realize, okay, I need to back off some. And so it's like looking at, why am I not sleeping? Why am I easily irritated with my colleagues or with my spouse or whoever? And then to start thinking, okay, what's going on in my life and that sort of thing. And is it something where I do need to stop and just take a break and hibernate for a little while? So I also, when kids are trying to decide what they want to, a decision that they want to make between two things, I'll tell them to clear their minds and clear their bodies, and then think, I'm going to make decision A. All right, how do you feel about that? Not what do you think about it, how do you feel when you do that? And then clear it again, come back to it a few minutes later and go, okay, I'm going to go with B. How do you feel with that? And that's oftentimes how I make decisions, as well as pros and cons and things like that, potential outcomes and all that. How do I feel about it?
One of the common threads I'm hearing, and also connecting to your sermon, Lori, today, that curiosity and new experiences. I'm the type of person who says variety is the spice of life, and curiosity helps with that. And that the feeling of discovering something new, something that you like, something that you feel satisfaction and joy around, it feels good. A sense of wonder and awe is healthy for all of us. And I think especially as we grow older and more set in our ways, it can be easy to lose sight of that. So I'm wondering, how do you see curiosity as this thing that gives you life and joy and satisfaction in learning the new things and questing for those novelties and new experiences and things?
I plan to always be adventurous. I know that's it's not, I probably won't always be adventurous, but one conduit, I guess, of my curiosity is just school, and I get to learn so much every day, and I love going to school, and I probably won't go to school for a long time. But I like to travel, and I like to try new things, and I think that's an important thing to keep doing.
Be curious about
Yeah,
people
be
and
curious
cultures
about the
and
world,
places and
and
yeah.
Can't really talk about it for a while or whatever. I'm 16.
Sure. You're in a different place on this journey. Other thoughts about how curiosity gives you the spice of life?
I just want to offer a cautionary comment that we are all in different phases of life and places in faith development. And I don't think a person with a 9-month-old can manage too much curiosity.
Disney princesses. That's where I'm at.
I mean, it is right in front of you what you're called to do. Shepherd these beautiful children.
Well,
I think with that though, it gives this new kind of sense of responsibility to be more diverse. Because I've noticed part of my journey in the last 9 months has been self-reflection on what areas I want to grow and be broader, right? Because it takes more work to keep that energy level up, to keep having the curiosity. Because I keep looking at new things going, I'd love it if my son and I could go out and do that thing together. Or these are the types of things that I want to be able to do with my daughter. So yes, it takes a lot more energy, and I do it for about the 15 minutes before I go to bed every night. But it's fun, and I'm looking towards the future of these are the cool things that I want to start doing.
just one thought for all of you that I think I've been realizing more and more recently is that curiosity sends me pursuing information, but sometimes the curiosity that is the best, and I'm thinking about you with your little ones, is not doing a thing except observing who they are and what it appears that they are experiencing, right? So I think what we can do with curiosity is ratchet up our to-do list, when sometimes what curiosity can be about is what happens when I stop playing music, what happens when I stop pursuing more information, and what can I learn from this moment, right?
Well, thank you all for participating in this and your busyness, busy weeks at school, on both ends, and busy in life with family and work and stuff. So thank you all for being here and sharing a little bit of your curiosity with us today.